So basically, we are going to get into UiPath and understand what are the components of UiPath and how does UiPath work by itself, right? So taking all the available tools in the market. So we have a number of tools, with the giants being UiPath, Blue Prism, Automation Anywhere. So other than that, we have Pega, WorkFusion, we have SoftMotive, Jidoka. There's so many other tools that is available. Pega being a BPM tool, partly they are used for you can use it for business process management also. I mean, it's a business process management tool. You can also use it for any kind of process automations also, right? So these are the available tools, out of which UiPath has got a more developer friendly environment related workflow creation, so that it's easier to adapt for the developer who do not know the much of the programming the technologies behind it. So probably that's why UiPath will be the easiest of all the softwares, at least in comparison with the Blue Prism and Automation Anywhere. So what does UiPath as a tool have? Okay, so yeah, UiPath as a tool is basically, it's built on Microsoft.NET. So just as Excel is built on VB, we have UiPath Blue Prism is built on Microsoft.NET platform. So which means the base of the tool is Microsoft.NET. So if you see, there are certain .NET concepts that you will still be using inside the tool, and for people who know .NET, it is going to be relatively a little easier, because we might be using the data flows and everything. Whatever we use in .NET, it is going to be there. But most of the cases, we are not going to work only on .NET projects, right? So we will be working on a project which is having a user interface developed in Python, or a web page which is developed on HTML. So we are never bothered about the programming technology. So as an RPA developer, I will be only, I will be only interested in my workflow creation and designing of my workflow using the basics of whatever I can see with the user interface, right? So the tool is basically built on Microsoft.NET. So what in all integrations it has got? So it has got integrations with most of the softwares that is available in the market. Even the latest software is now integrated with UiPath. So you have, even if you take any cloud services or any kind of, the basic MS Office, or any web applications, or any Windows applications, or if you are talking about Linux or mainframe applications, all those things you will be able to work. Okay, any kind of Citrix applications. So we have got integrations already done, so that you will be seamlessly communicating between the UiPath and the other software that is available. Okay, so we'll see more on the integrations and how we'll be working on every other software tool as we get inside the course, right? So fine. So this is going to be the overall picture of your the UiPath. So the UiPath Studio, UiPath components come with three information. Okay, so three parts. So one is your studio, which is where you will be going and drawing your flow chart. So this is for workflow creation. Okay, and we have whatever process automation you created. So which means you have a 10-line step, that is your project requirement. You go ahead and convert that into a workflow. And from the workflow, now you have completed your workflow. There is an inbuilt robot which will be executing your process automation. Okay, so we are not going to build robots. The robot is already available, that is inbuilt with UiPath suite of applications. So the robot will be executing your workflow, whatever you created. So now fine, you have already created your workflow, your robot executes it fine. And whenever you want to deploy it, we are going to use a component called orchestrator, right? The studio will allow you to design automation using the drag and drop functionality. So you almost all the boxes will be, you just need to go ahead and drag and drop so that you create your workflow or your flow chart. So the robot will be executing, the robot will still be on your system, right? So that will be executing the information that you created. So in your studio, whatever you created, the robot will pick that particular workflow and it will start with the flowchart execution. And then the orchestrator is a kind of a dashboard which will allow you to deploy, monitor. So you might not be having just one process automation, right? End of the day, you might be talking about too many automations available. So basically you will see it's a kind of a dashboard where you will be seeing all the process automations, what it is doing, whether it is a payroll process or whether it is a raw material inventory process or whatever. You will be seeing a list of the automations that is being there in that particular customer's environment. So you will be able to run that, or you will be able to monitor whether what is running, what is not running, and stuff like that. And you can also, if you're putting any schedules or something, you can also work on those schedules, right? So this is how, these are the three components. So you have your studio, you have your robot, and you have your orchestrator. So these three components are going to be available when you do the installation itself. So if you take from the installation, you will have your studio and robot installed on your local computer. So whatever is your system that you're going to work on, so by mandatorily you will be having your studio and your robot installed. So once your stuff is done, in the community edition, you have the orchestrator as a single orchestrator. Okay, it's a web application. Usually it is a web application, whether it is an enterprise edition or a trial edition of the enterprise or a community edition. Usually the orchestrator is a web-based orchestrator. Okay, so you will be, so what actually happens in the community edition is, it is hosted on the cloud. So you will have a single orchestrator for everybody who is using the community edition. So I will also be hitting the same orchestrator. You will also be hitting the same orchestrator in the cloud. So we have a web portal. So both of us will be hitting the same orchestrator, but the only difference is you will have a definitive space and I will have a definitive space. So which means I won't be able to see what your process automations are, and you won't be able to see what my process. So we have the privacy also installed because it is a community edition. It is hosted like that. Okay. So what happens in the enterprise edition? So in the enterprise edition, what happens is your orchestrator again comes as a component as that of a UiPath Studio. So you will be able to install it on a particular server, or if you want to install it on a cloud and then use it, you can install it on a cloud and you can use it. So anywhere from the server or from the cloud, you will be using it as a web application. Okay, so you will be hitting it as a web portal. That is part of the infrastructure team will take care of the installations and everything. You will have a separate guide for orchestrator installation and stuff. As a developer, we will be only required to actually go ahead and create workflows and do the deployment. The installation and everything will be taken care by the corresponding teams. Okay, so from there also, in the enterprise edition also, you will be given a link and you will be hitting that particular URL only, whether it is hosted on a server or whether it is hosted on a particular cloud based orchestrator, right? So this is what is your overall picture of the components. So when I say these are the three components, how does it go with the installations? So the installation goes like this only. So you have a client layer, which is your end user, right? So end user or your developer, however you want to take. So you have an inbuilt robot and you will have your studio. So basically the studio will be using the robot to actually execute the piece of code while you're developing. Okay, so even if the end user requires a kind of a situation where we'll see the differences and also that you will be able to correlate at a later point whatever I'm saying now. Okay, so the end user also will be required to do the same kind of setup. So this is your client layer. The server layer is nothing but where your orchestrator is going to be deployed. So where you give your streaming of, if 10 people are going to use your same process, right? 10 HRs are going to use, or 10 inventory managers are going to use the same process. So that time you have to give the same process or automation to 10 people. So how do you do that? So all that happens in your server layer. And okay, and in case you're doing a database connectivity, not all projects require a database connectivity. So in case you're doing a database connectivity, we have a persistency layer. This is not a mandatory step. Okay, so only if you have a database connectivity, then you need to go ahead and create a persistency layer. This is the same setup that we do for these all the components, right? So this is your overall picture of your how your UiPath Studio will appear like. So with that coming into the picture, so these are your certifications that is available. We have two global certifications. One is your UiPath Certified RPA Associate, and the other one is the Advanced RPA Certified Developer. Okay, so both the certifications comes as a multiple choice questions. It is hosted by Pearson VUE with a tie-up with UiPath. So that's how so the maximum, the minimum pass mark is going to be 70%. You have a 1 hour, 1.5 hours of a duration to complete your certification, right? Okay. So with this, what we'll do is we'll get into UiPath Studio. And this is how your studio will be actually looking like. So your studio is basically, this is your current version of the studio that you get in. If you go into help, Okay, I'll tell you how you need to install your stuff and all. If you're going to help, there is a kind of a version that you will be having. You have an update channel, which is a stable or which is a preview. Stable is nothing but even if how many ever there are upgrades on the community edition, only if I go and ask for an upgrade, it will go and upgrade, which means mine is a stable edition. So usually we go for stable edition. A preview is nothing but as UiPath pushes the information, your software also will get upgraded, which means today you will be learning something, tomorrow you might be searching for a component, it might not be there, which is not the right thing, right? So we also mimic the same as an enterprise edition and we go ahead. There is no harm in actually having whether it is a stable or whether it is a preview. Both will allow you to learn. Okay, but usually stable goes for, you won't have that many number of updates and you won't be having a lot of surprises, right? And every update that you have, if you have registered with UiPath as a learner or if you have registered with the UiPath, every update that goes in, you will have a mail that is coming into your particular mail ID. Okay, so you can see what are your number of what does that particular upgrade actually do, whether it is required for you or not. If it is not required, why to go ahead and upgrade, right? So those kind of options you will be able to see. Fine. So what does UiPath Studio actually look like? So this is how once it is installed in your particular system, this is how your UiPath Studio is going to be. So you have your number of options that is available. You have your licensing information, what is the version of the software that is available, and a comprehensive set of options that will be available, right? So let's get into any kind of a process automation that we might be working. Say, suppose you are working on a process automation, which is very, very simple. Okay. So which is like, you're working on just a 10-step process automation. So which means a 10-step would be, when you're converting it into a flowchart, it might be dealing it as, it might be going for like 20 or boxes or maybe even 10 boxes or just 15 boxes in a flowchart, right? So those kind of simpler processes, you can have it as a process. So there are different templates based on your project requirement. You can go ahead and use those templates to create your flowchart or to create your workflow. So the simplest and the basic template that is available is a process. Okay. So once I click on process, you will be allowed to go ahead and create your particular project. So creating your particular project automatically happens in your particular system. So there will be a folder structure that will be created from where a project actually will be created for that particular process automation. So what does it happen in your projects? So this is how your UiPath Studio will be looking like. So in your UiPath Studio, you have something called a project panel. So the project panel is nothing but a project that is created for the process automation that you're working on. So suppose you are going to automate an Amazon process. So which means you will be creating a flowchart for the Amazon process and the project for that particular process gets created here. Okay. So this is your project name and you have certain dependencies. In case you're connecting to a database, you can go ahead and add a data service here, and you have a settings, which is an encrypted file. You have a XAML file. I'll tell you what is that. And we have a project.json file. So what is the project.json file? A project.json file is your basic settings of your particular project. Okay. So this is automatically created for every project that you create. A project.json file will be automatically created for every project that we create. Yeah, a project.json file will be created automatically for every project. Most of the time, we are not going to modify any of the information inside it, but I'll tell you what are the options that is available. Okay. So what does the project.json file actually have? So this project.json file is an automatically generated file that is available in your project folder. So this gives you all the information of what you do in your project or what you have done in your project. Okay. So basic information of your project, so that somebody else, when they are coming and viewing your project, they will have an idea of what you have done. Just having a look at this particular JSON file, they will be able to understand what kind of a project it is or what kind of a process automation it is and everything, right? So the information that it has, the first one is your name of your project. And in case you have a description, then you will be having your description that is available. Then you have the start point of execution. From where do I want to actually start the execution of my process? Okay, so we usually start from the main.xaml file. So what actually happens is you're going to have your name of your project, then your description, and then from where, what is your initial point of execution. So the parent point of execution is going to be the main. So which is, we call it as the main. So usually we will be having, we always start with main.xaml file. Okay. So in case you have some other file that you want to have it as a start of execution, then you have to go ahead and change it here. But 90% of the projects, we stick with the main file itself. We do not go ahead and change. Okay. And there are certain things called dependencies. And then these are all information that is automatically generated. We are not supposed to change. And it is mostly the information that is required for the project. Okay, so these are certain things that you need not worry about, out of which there are only 3 things that you need to be looking at anytime when you're opening somebody else's project. Okay, you might be looking at what is your schema version. The schema version is UiPath's project.json files version. This is the structure of the project.json file. So they also, how does this particular structure, so they might be having a particular structure available, and based on that particular structure, they might be going and creating this particular file, right? So for this structure, they are maintaining a particular version. Okay, so this particular version is the structure of your JSON file, or the schema version of your JSON file. Then we have a studio version. That is, this particular project was created with this particular version of UiPath Studio. So why is it required? So anytime you do a process automation in 10.6, right? After 5 years, somebody else is going and looking at your code. So when they are opening that particular information, they will be in 25th version or in 30th version, in an upgraded version, right? So just for the sake of in what version was the this particular process automation was created, right? So somebody else is opening, you are having a 2010 today and you're done with your process automation. Somebody is having a version that is 19 is the version. So what happens when they are opening, most of your, some of the features might not work as expected. Anything above this, you will not have a problem. Anything below this, there are chances that you might have an issue, right? Certain things might, because that is an upgrade of this particular thing. So when you're having an upgrade, which means it will have this features plus some other features, right? So obviously there won't be any issues. But when you have a downgraded version, so there are chances that your code might not work or your process automation might not work. So that is why we have an explicit information as what is your studio version, so that this particular project cannot be opened or should not be opened in a studio that is below this particular thing. So there's a opportunity that it may not work completely. Okay, so that is why we have the studio version. Then we have a project version. So project version is, as you, this initial version will be 1. So this version, so initial version will be 1. As you go to the quality team, defects, you fix something. So every time there's an upgrade of your version. So you might not be there when you're deploying, you might not be deploying this version. You might be deploying the latest version of the upgraded version of your project. So when I'm making some changes, that will be my 1.0. When I'm making another change, that will be upgraded to 2.0, right? So you have your major, minor, and those kind of versions will be available, right? So where are we? Okay, so those information are available here. So all these are runtime options that is available. So you need not worry about it. This gets automatically generated. So here there's another thing called execution type. The execution type is nothing but what kind of a project have you created. Have you created a process automation that we call it as a workflow? Have you created a reusable component that we call it as a library? Have you created some other kind of a template? So those kind of things gets necessarily differentiated here. So by viewing this file itself, you will know whether you have created a reusable component or whether you have created something that is just a process automation. So you can simply go ahead and, you know, there is some idea that you will be getting in your particular mind. So you will be able to understand that. Then you have another option. All these are all the design options and everything. So here there is another option where it is available as Visual Basic. You can change it to C#.NET. Okay, but as a part of your UiPath Studio, that is not a mandatory step. Anybody who is aware of C#.NET, they can go ahead and change it to C#.NET. But visually, you won't feel any difference in the UiPath Studio. This is the back-end programming of the tool. Okay, usually we don't recommend this. Usually it is just left as such, and you can still continue with your particular information as to Visual Basic itself. This is just the information of you in case when you go for interviews and they ask you what is there as a part of your project.json file, you will be able to explain clearly as to what and all is there in your project.json file, right? So this is just an overall picture of what the JSON file consists of, and we do not modify this particular file. It is a file that is not supposed to be modified, right? So then we have something. So this is in your project. So this gets saved in your local system. So if I go and open that particular thing, my local file explorer will show me that the entire project is now created, and you will be able to see the entire project having a folder getting created for itself, right? And then we have something called a main.xaml file. So what does a main.xaml file actually do? The main.xaml file, the moment I open it, so this is your main.xaml file. Go and open your main.xaml file. You will have your main.xaml file getting created. So what is your main.xaml file? This is where I'm going to actually draw my flowchart. So this area we call it as a workflow designer. Okay, so this is your workflow designer. You actually go and have your flowchart getting created, or have your automation workflow getting created. All right, so this is part one. Then we have something called, okay, what are the boxes that you need to have your flowchart? You have to have boxes so that your flowchart gets built, right? So those boxes are going to be available in the activities panel. So technically we call a syntax as an activity inside UiPath. Okay, so an activity is nothing but a box that you might be doing. So suppose you are going to hit on open notepad. So you have to go and search for an open application, and you have to give notepad as an application. So open application will be part of your activity that is already pre-written for you. Okay, so if you just click and drag it here, I'm just clicking it and I'm dragging it here. So you will be having your first box of your particular information created. Okay, so this is a syntax that is already written. What application to open, you will be saying it. So you can go ahead and say, okay, what is the application, or whether you have a path. So in case you have an open application and you want to give the path of the notepad.exe, then you can go and give your information here. So we have something called a properties panel for each activity or a syntax to work on. So these properties panel are, not all the information in the properties panel are important, okay, or mandatory. Okay, so this is going to be varying as per the, so one particular activity will have just 3 properties. This activity has got maybe around 10 properties. So it varies with each activity to activity. So what does this properties panel actually say? The properties panel is something which will be a kind of a feature for that particular activity. For example, if you have a message box, okay, a message box is just going to print something. Okay, so if you have a message box, so the message box actually as an activity just has around 7 or 8 options, out of which what I need to have, a message box is going to print something or display something as a message box, right? So only the information of what I need to print is a mandatory step here, right? So you are still having an I symbol, which is which is a exclamatory symbol, which means that the particular activity is not right so far. The moment I give some particular information, you can give it here or you can give it here. So wherever you go and give, see, the mandatory information is once satisfied, the particular option goes away, which means this particular activity is now, you can work with this particular activity. So here the mandatory information is only the text information that you need to display for the user. Other than that, there are no options that are mandatory. So these properties you cannot by heart it. It comes with practice. So for a message box, most of the time for a message box, we will automatically, after 10 times or 12 times of working, you will know that message box requires a mandatory step of what message it needs to display. So similarly, open application requires a mandatory step of what application it needs to open. So those are the information. This comes with practice. Okay, so the properties window just allows you to actually totally utilize your particular activity. Okay, so most of the activities may be having just one mandatory information, and some of them might be having 2 or 3. For example, if you're connecting to some other application, you need to give your username, password. You need to say that you need to. So those kind of applications, those kind of activities will have maybe username, password, and then the application information. So those will be the properties panel that you're actually going ahead and that you're viewing it, right? So properties panel is just a feature that is available for this particular activity to work on. So that gets displayed in your properties panel, right? So this is how your flowchart will be built. So which means I'm just going ahead and I'm just creating more number of random stuff. Okay, so I'm just dragging and dropping. So this is how your a flowchart will get created. So if you see, my flowchart is now getting created. So this is me, this will be my step 1, my step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. So automatically my flowchart, say if it is a 100-step flowchart or if it is a 1000-step flowchart, automatically you will be dragging and dropping all your information, right? So your technical flowchart gets created. So your technical flowchart, when it gets created, we call it as a workflow, right? So when a workflow gets created, each of the activities will have the corresponding whatever it needs to do. So message box will actually display an information. If you're opening an application, this will actually open an application and give the control back to you. So those kind of information will be available. So now if you want to, there's something called an outline panel. So the outline panel will actually display the information of the overall picture. So see, suppose you're having a large workflow, right? It is impossible for you to go ahead and scroll down, scroll up and see, right? So we have an outline. So basically your open application. So if you go and click on this, whatever you are doing it inside that particular application, you will be able to view. So this gives you, so the moment I'm at the bottom of the screen, the moment I go and want to create, want to look at the first activity or the second activity, I can go and look, automatically the control goes. So this displays a structure of your particular project or your process or your workflow, right? And then we have our object repository. This is like, I'll tell you what is this. So this is like overall your repository for this particular project, right? So let's leave that here, right? And then we have your snippets. Snippets is nothing but UiPath has given you some kind of additional coding. For example, if you want to create some delay of 20 minutes, or if you want to do some looping logic, okay, they have given you some set, or if you want to open a calculator application. So they have just, this is an example, nowhere you will use all this. So if you have if you want to open a calculator, then what is the code for opening a calculator? Okay, the entire code that is given. So the calculator will open, it will do some operation and it will give it to you, right? So this is how you generally do your flowchart creation. So here, as we get inside, you will be able to understand. So here they are opening the calculator, they're clicking on the 4 button, they are clicking on add, they're clicking on the 5 button and equals button. So obviously you will be getting 4 plus 5 is equal to 9, and you will be getting the output as the message box. So 9 is your output, right? And they're closing the calculator. So each of the activity, if you see, it's a drag and drop functionality. So everything is written. You just need to go ahead and say, okay, here, if I need to press 4, then you need to click on 4 and say 4, I'm going to press. If you want to click on minus, then you want to go and click on minus and say, I want to press minus. Okay, so this is how, so all these things are, there are some codes that is pre-written for you, but most of the time, 90% of the time, these codes are not going to be relevant for us as a developer. This is just an example code that they have given you, okay, so that you can view when you're learning, right? So this is your overall picture of your stuff, right? Coming back to your project panel, right? So we have something called a dependency. So a dependency is nothing but a kind of a project dependency that the project needs to have so that this project can execute. Okay, now if you see, there are activities, right? So the moment I go ahead and search for Excel, I'm going to work on Excel related automation. So I go and search for Excel. So there's already Excel related activity that is available. So for every operation that you do in Excel, there's an activity or a syntax that is pre-written for you, right? So all these activities for you cannot have. So the moment you actually install UiPath Studio, it comes with a 300 to 400 plus syntaxes already loaded into your particular studio. Okay, so what actually happens is, for easier categorization, not every time you can remember all the 400, right? So what we do is, I cannot remember everything inside this particular thing. So what I will be doing is, there is a tagging factor they have done. So if you're going to work on Excel, they do a grouping of all the activities that are related to an Excel into a particular group. That group is called a package. Okay, so suppose if you're working on Excel related automation, then you can go and have a dependency of this package. So the package is grouping of same set of activities. So a package is nothing but, you might be having Excel related package. which will group all the Excel related activities together. So which means if I remove this dependency, okay, I'm removing this remove dependency. Right? So I removed. Now what happens is if I go and search for Excel, there are no activities that is available because this particular project is no more using Excel related package. So which in turn deleted all your Excel related activities, right? So a package is nothing but a grouping of same set of activities performed on a particular application. So if you search for Azure, you will be able to see one or two kind of activities. So what actually happens is if I go and add this particular, if I go and delete this particular information, then the Azure activities will not come. So if I go and search for mail automation, I will be having it. Okay. So basically it comes with a preset loaded of activities in your thing. The basic operations are Excel activities, mailed activities, your system related activities, and your web activities, your UI automation activities. Okay, not web activities, user interface automation activities, right? So these are the basic activities that comes preloaded into your particular system. Now you're going to work on a advanced software, okay, which UiPath is already integrated with. Say suppose you're going to work on, say, Azure, or you're going to work on AWS on a cloud. Okay, so now you're going to work on that. How do I go? I just have one particular activity that is available, so I need to go ahead and view I know for sure UiPath has integrated with Azure, so which means like Excel, I should be able to see more number of activities here, correct? So when I'm not able to go and see the activities displayed here, I'm going to go and take it from the market that is available for the UiPath. Okay, so there is a marketplace which is available where you can go and subscribe, or you can go and download your necessary packages. So that we can do it with a managed package. So this is a centralized repository which will actually have all the packages. Why we need not have it everything downloaded at one single shot is it occupies space. All these activities or all these packages gets loaded onto your local system. Okay, so which means if I'm going to take Azure, if I'm going to take all the integrations that is available, I'm going to occupy more space in your local computer. So that is why we have an centralized repository. So you can go ahead and download only the ones you actually require. Okay, so you have your project settings, all your folders where your packages will be saved, all your local information, the project dependencies that is again that is available in your project panel. Then you go for all packages. Don't go for local, go for the official. Okay, so the official packages are nothing but that is agreed by UiPath, or that is agreed. Azure is a Microsoft product, or that, okay, so which means Microsoft also should have agreed for the integration to happen, right? So here if I go ahead and search for Azure, I will be having either the project that is created, or either the packages that is created by Microsoft, or the activities package that is created by UiPath. Okay, so each thing will have its own particular thing. All the information, again, we cannot by heart all these things, right? So everything will be displayed in their corresponding website, either be it UiPath or Microsoft. So you have dedicated information, right? So similarly, all these information will be available in the Microsoft's website or in the UiPath's website as to what kind of activity you need to download, or what kind of package you need to download when you're working on. So you can go and relevantly, based on your project requirement, you can go and download. So go ahead and take only the official information, the ones that is recognized by the companies or created by the companies. These are the official ones. Okay, so if I go ahead and click on something, so let me go ahead and click on this particular activity. I want to download it. So I go ahead, choose the version. This is the version of this particular package. Okay, so this in the enterprise edition also will appear like this. You can choose the version and you can download it. So I go for install, save. Now this will get automatically loaded onto my local computer and then reflected here in my UiPath Studio. Okay, so now it is downloading it. So now in your project panel, if you see, the Azure related activities comes as a dependency, and you would be seeing Azure related activities already getting added. So before we had this, just this information, now you're having all kind of, your all kind of other activities that are related to your Azure services. Okay, so this is how you will be. So in case you're working on any other software, you can go ahead and search for that particular software and you can go ahead. But the only thing that we need to remember is, say UiPath is itself is a very friendly company. Okay, even I as a freelancer or you as a freelancer or anybody will be able to go ahead and create a package like this. So if you see, there will be information that is created by individual people also, and it is approved by UiPath. So you can use this particular information and you can create your own process automations. You can use them, download it, and you can use it. Okay, so you can still use it. These are approved by UiPath. But on security purposes, when we are doing official, our real-time projects, we are not supposed to use, as a part of security, we are not supposed to use any of the information that is built by other than the recognized companies. Okay, so any individual information you are not supposed to download and use. That is part of your company security. Okay, there is no harm. UiPath will allow you to do everything, that is fine, but as part of your company security, we won't be able to. So choose wisely. So you choose between whatever is your company's information. Even you or me will be able to go ahead and get your information approved by UiPath. If you send the information approved, they have a UiPath freelancers community, so you can go ahead and get your stuff approved also, and then it will be visible officially globally to everyone, so that they can use your particular package for the activities that is available, right? So this is going to be about your managed packages, right? So all the other parts we are going to see one by one, but the most important information that I wanted to explain was, let me delete this. Okay, we have something called a sequence and a flow chart. Okay, so the initial step of my process automation. Okay, so I'm going to create a process automation. So let's take the example of, you're logging into Amazon and you're generating a report in Amazon. Okay, and this process is getting automated. So you're building a workflow for this. So what will be happening? The first step will be, you will be opening your particular browser, then keying in your URL, entering your password, username, password. Then you will go click on multiple clicks, and then you will go ahead and do your create report, and then a report will get generated, and that's it. Your automation will complete, right? So what is this? This is like a 5-step or a 6-step automation, right? A smaller piece of automation, and it is going to not have any kind of condition checking, right? So those kind of automations, that is very, very simple. We call it as a sequence. Okay, a sequence is a kind of, you have it as an activity. A sequence is a kind of a automation, or it is a kind of a process which is having linear steps. Okay, so linear in the sense, it is all one directional. Okay, the arrows go in one way, so there is no any conditions, there are no any decisions that we need to make. If you give decisions, then you have to have two options, right? Yes or no. So those kind of options are not going to be available here. This is the simplest form of a process, or a simplest form of a workflow. I wouldn't say process, the simplest form of a workflow. Okay, so though, which means all the activities that goes inside the is going to be linear. Okay, it goes one directional. So this is a sequence. That is why you have this particular information icon as a going in one direction. It is sequence. So anything that is going to have a kind of a more kind of a branching or decisions that you need to make, that we are going to call as a flow chart. Okay, so a flow chart is going to be a little complex information that you have. So the flow chart is nothing but more branching, anywhere that you need to make that you need to make decisions. So at that time you would have different directions that your project will be executing in, right? So you are going to have it as a flow chart. So what happens is, it goes in one direction, it can also go into another direction. Okay, so your program flow is going in different directions based on the branching or based on the decisions it takes, right? So these kind of complex processes, you can have it as a flow chart. Okay, so what you can do is, a sequence is the smallest piece of option that is available. So a smallest piece, I mean a more linear information, right? A flow chart is kind of information that you'll have as branching. That is why you have a icon like this. So what you can do is, with this particular option in mind, we can also say a flow chart can have number of sequences inside it. So which means I can go ahead and create a sequence. I can go ahead and create like this. Okay. I can go ahead and create like this, and I can connect it back like this. Okay. So inside this, I can again have some 5 activities which are linear. Okay, so what it will do is, this particular flowchart will execute this sequence. Say suppose you are doing login related operations. So you can simply say this is a login related operation. So inside this, you will be giving your username, password, click on login button and everything. And then this login functionality will perform. And then it will go and do the next sequence. If you have a next sequence, it will perform the next sequence. Otherwise, it will go and perform this operation and then this operation. So you can have multiple sequences. So whenever you are having a bigger project, right? So what we do is we create sequences based on the functionality. So login functionality, we put it as one sequence. Then we put a data processing functionality. So that if it is going to be a linear kind of steps, then we put it as one sequence and we give it. So that the moment you view your code itself, you will be able to understand, okay, I need not go and see what is inside. I know there is an option for login. Okay, this particular information does the login functionality. Okay, so you can have multiple sequences inside a flowchart. Okay, but the vice versa should not happen, because a sequence is a linear form and you're putting a branching inside a sequence means you're contradicting, right? So you can have a sequence inside a flowchart, and a flowchart should not be inside a sequence. This is the option of a flowchart and a sequence. Okay, so this what you can do is, there are two options. Okay, you can create it as part of your main workflow. So part of the main, you can create a flowchart, or you can create a sequence and continue your program. Or if you want to create separately the login itself, you want to create it a separate file, then you can go and do the same option as new sequence or a flowchart. So if I want to create a new functionality for sequence, and I want to put it in a different file, I can go and create it as new sequence, and I will be creating this as a login functionality. So what will happen? It will just create it as a new file. And here you can go and do the same information that you already did here. So the options are going to be the same, but a new file will be created. That's it. A new XAML file will be created. Okay. XAML, a new XAML file will be created. But whatever it does as a sequence, here also it will be the same linear operation. If you create it as a flowchart also, here also it will be a branching kind of an information. So both the things remains the same as to how it works, but only that here it is going to be inside the same workflow. I mean, inside the same file. Here it is going to be separate file. That's it, is the difference. Okay. And now that we have what is a sequence and what is a flowchart, we also have, say, sequence is the first step, right? Above sequence, we have something called a flowchart, which overcomes the difficulties of a sequence, right? So similar to that, we are going to have something called a state machine, which will be the advanced version of a flowchart. So you have something called a state machine. So state machine also you can search it from here. Okay, here also it will be available, and here also it will be available. Okay, so what does a state machine actually do? So a state machine, again, you will see a different kind of a version, different kind of an icon. So what does a state machine actually do? A state machine actually will be, say, in a flowchart, what actually happens is, the same box can have only one connector or one arrow. I cannot have the same box having back flowing in a different direction. So one box, there will be only one arrow. So which means this particular box, after this, it can go only in this direction. Okay. Or you can connect it. This particular arrow, you can connect it to another box like this. You can go in the backward direction. That should be fine. But one box is going to have only one particular direction. Okay. So however it goes, you can go ahead. So this is one option. This is one flaw, which means you want to connect to something else, you won't be able to connect. Or if you want to connect this box also and this box also, it won't be able to connect. But that option gets eradicated in your state machine. Okay. So you can create a state machine like this. or you can go and create a state machine as a separate file also. Okay, just for example, I'll create a state machine as a separate file. So a state machine, what it will do is, it has the option of, instead of you going ahead and creating multiple boxes, you have a centralized box which will be called a state. So you can create states which will be taking it as one box. This will be taking it as, you can correlate it to one sequence, another sequence, another sequence, like that you can have. And there will be, the last step is going to be the final state. Okay, state machine, we are going to have an advanced topic that will be available. That will be the last topic of the of this particular course. Okay, so we are going to cover in detail what a state machine is. I'm just giving you an intro so that you just have a knowledge of what it is, right? So state machine, so what actually happens is, I will be having an opportunity from the same box, I can connect to multiple boxes. So from the same box, I can connect to my same box. So if you see, there are different connectors. Oh, sorry. So there are different connectors that you can use. The direction is different. So you can have, so this is one information that gets upgraded from a flowchart to the state machine. Okay, so which means from this box I can connect to the 100th box, but in a flowchart you won't be able to do it, right? It will be similar to a, from this particular thing you go to the 100th step. So you can kind of correlate it that way. Okay, a state machine comes with the concept of, you can jump from one box to another box irrelevant of the directions, or you can do the same box activity, you can connect to the same box on certain conditions. So this comes as a part of state machine, right? So this is one concept, right? Then we have something called a global handler. A global handler is again a separate file. This is not part of an activity. You won't be able to have it as an activity. So this is a separate file that gets created. So a global handler is nothing but a file that can get created only for one file that gets created for a single project. You cannot have multiple global handlers. You can have multiple sequence files, you can have multiple state machines, all that is fine. But a global handler is only one file per project. Okay, so what does a global handler actually do? The global handler is going to be the file which will take care of all your invalid scenarios. So when your project encounters certain errors, or when a project errors, in the sense, there will be already invalid scenarios or errors that you will be doing something, right? You will be managing. Okay, but suddenly, all of a sudden, there is a new error that has come where you have not handled. That is an unmanaged error, right? So what happens is, your bot will not know what to do, correct? So when you know invalid scenarios, when you have designed your bot to validate invalid scenarios, then the bot will know. But at a certain time, when your bot does not know, a new error has come and it does not know what has happened, at that time we are going to get your global handler come into the picture. For suppose there is an unmanaged error or something that is happening. Okay, you're doing something on the Amazon website, and Amazon website has closed. Okay, that is an unmanaged error. So what will happen? So directly the control will be coming back to your global handler. Okay, so from here, this particular information will come down here, and it will first take a log of that particular information. So what is the error? And then you will be choosing what it needs to do next as a part of your activity. So here what it will do is, there are 4 options that is available. So the input of this particular file will be the error info. So it will say internet browser closed or internet browser crashed. So that will be the error information. So that gets transferred here. And this particular file will tell you what the bot should do for the unmanaged error. So whether the bot should continue, which means it will continue to the next step, and continue the rethrown part we will see when we are doing exception handling. Okay, it will just continue. Just remember that it will continue. Okay, and if it is an ignore option, it will ignore that particular error and continue to the next activity. So suppose if you have a error here, the control will go here, and it will say continue, means it will come down back to main, and it will go to the next activity. So it will not display the error. Okay. So in case you want to say retry, so what will happen? The message box will get retried. That particular activity will get retried. If you say abort, which means it will just stop there. Okay. So the entire project will be closed, or the process execution will be stopped. So these are the 4 behaviors. Okay. So you have a continue where the error will be rethrown. You have an ignore where it will just ignore that particular error and you go to the next activity. We have a retry where the action will be performed again. And we have an abort which will just stop the particular activity's action and it will stop your entire process execution. So how are we going to do it? So basically we can choose between the options here. So any kind of unmanaged error that you get, the file will come here. So here you will say if the error info is going to be, so you have to say, no, if I'm doing a retry, okay, how many times will I retry? I have to give a number, right? I need to retry for twice or I need to retry for thrice. So here we give that automatic number. So if you say, if you want to retry that particular option, so you go and say the retry number is less than 3. So what happens? The first time it will retry, it will increment to 1. Then the next time it will retry, it will increment to 2. The next time it will retry, it will increment to 3. So at that time it will be lesser than 3, right? So I mean it will be equal to 3. So at that time, so it will check that particular option. So as the retry count greater than 3 or not, or less than 3 or not. So accordingly, you can go and choose your behavior. Here it says error action dot retry. So it is going to retry. So once it reaches that particular retry count, you are going to go and abort. Okay. So you can choose instead of retry, you can go and say error action dot continue. So it will just continue there. You can say error action dot ignore. So it will just ignore and will go to the next step. So here you can write your piece of code. This is how your global handler will actually be. Okay, we won't have additional programming. So here you will just simply say, most of the time it will be the same option. You will be retrying, and if you know most of the thing, if you retry and if it is not working, you have to stop only. You cannot continue to the next step, which means you are doing it incorrect, right? So we still stick on to the same information. You will retry for a certain number of times, and after still the error is coming. If your Internet Explorer has crashed and still the Internet Explorer or your Amazon website is not responding, which means after a certain try, you will be closing and you will be thinking, okay, let me do it after some time, right? The same thing we will do it here. That is what a global handler will actually do. Okay, so this is the overall picture of what actually the information does. This is your sequence. So sequence is going to be the smallest part of your project. So this is more suitable for linear processes, which is going in one directional, right? So which means if you have a login related sequence, you can copy that particular login related sequence and you can use it anywhere else also. So you need not recode it again and again. So if you have a data processing related sequence and a similar project is using, you have to recode it elsewhere, then you have to copy this and you can go ahead and place it. So which means the sequence can be reusable also, right? Right? So your sequence could be something that you can use it as a part of that particular linear process, or you could also, you know, when you're using some login related functionality or particular sequence that you need to recode it, you can simply copy it. Even flowchart you can copy and you can do it. Okay. But ideally, we usually copy the sequences so that it's more easier for us instead of recoding, right? A flowchart is going to be for more than, you know, more for projects which are having more complexity, where you want to make decisions, where you want to make multiple branching. So those kind of business processes will go into a flowchart methodology. Then we have a state machine. A state machine is going to be like, if you can jump from one particular activity to another activity. So similarly, you can also have the same activity triggered again. Okay, you can loop to the same activity. So on certain conditions, if you want to connect back to the same activity of execution, you can do that. In flowchart, you won't be able to do it. Just has one connector. Okay, one connector or one array. Arrows are nothing but one connector that we use, right? So you can have only this particular thing. So state machine concept, we are going to again take in more depth information. So we are not continuing more deeper than this. And then we have a global exception handler. So the global exception handler is a file which will be determining your project's behavior whenever you have an unmanaged error, okay, or when you have an execution error. So basically, you will have only one global handler per project. Okay, so this is your overall picture of your project activities, right? So what did I cover? I covered most of the things, right? Okay, now that we saw, now we know what is a flowchart, now we know what is a sequence and everything. Now we are going to get into the advanced information. So we have certain types of projects, okay? So when I say certain types of projects, we have based on your requirement, okay? So if you have a project, see all project automations, all the projects that you create are going to be created either for end user, or you're going to create it for your own company, or you're going to create it for yourself, or it will be part of whatever creation that you do needs to end of the day go into the orchestrator, right? So all your projects, once you create in your studio, once you feel that your development is done, you will be moving it into the orchestrator. So that is one requirement. So other than that, you have certain kind of projects. So in case you want to use your particular information as, you have something called a foreground as a background, right? So in case you're going to run your particular project or a process automation as a background process, so then you can use a different version of template that is available. So UiPath has given different templates that is available for your development activity. So instead of you choosing as a simple process, you can choose based on your project requirement. You can choose the different template available and you can go and create your workflow. Okay, so the process is going to be the simplest project. So which means whatever we created, right, it is a process template. So you have this structure and you can simply drag and drop a flowchart or a sequence and then continue with your workflow creation. Okay, so this is your first template. The next template that you have is a library. A library is a reusable component that you want to create. Okay, so a reusable component is either you can just copy this information. This is not a reusable component. You can just copy this information and you can paste it, not copy as image, copy this information and then you can just paste it into a, so if here I can just copy this, Control C, and I can paste it here. Okay, this is not a reusable code. This is not a reusable library, I should say. This is a reusable code that you do a Control C and a Control V. So what actually happens is you can create a reusable code just like a package. Okay, so you have Azure.activities, right? You can also have UiPath.login.activities, or you can simply create a reusable package that you can use it inside. So which means your package will be installed here and your login will be an activity here. Okay, we'll see that later. Your login will be an activity here. This is a reusable activity that you create, or reusable package that you create. This is a reusable component. Okay, so if you want to create a reusable component, then you go ahead and choose this as a library. This will also have, this we'll see at a later point. So this will also have the similar set of workflow design, but the way that you're going to save and deploy it is going to be in a different way. Okay, it gets saved into your local system and then you can install it as a package and then you can have your particular activity created. There will be a new activity called login. You can just click it. So instead of this particular box, this entire box will be created as like this activity. You can just click on this, whatever this particular box will do, 3 activities are there. No, this will be grouped into an activity called login and you will just be able to see one particular stuff and you will have different properties. Okay, that is your reusable component. A template is a newer version of, since they are doing R&D, that is available only in the community edition. So if you want to create your own template of creation, certain projects will be like, okay, I want to do only, you are doing it for Amazon customer and Amazon says my projects are all, I wanted in this structure only. So you create a template for yourself. So that time you can go and create a template for yourself. Most ideally, we do not use this particular option. We go and stick on to process or we go and use any of the options that is available here. Okay, so you can also create a template for yourself and use it inside your particular project, right? So next comes your inbuilt set of templates based on your project requirement. Okay, the first template that we have is your background process. A background process template is nothing but okay, a background process is nothing but a process that runs from your orchestrator, which is deployed in the orchestrator, but it runs in the background. So which means it is a long running process, right? So that runs at the background, which is not notified to the user. So those kind of processes and all you can design using this background process template. Okay, here also the structure remains the same, the activities remain the same, the workflow design remains the same, how you use it inside a process, the same thing you can use. So ideally, your deployment also remains the same. So ideally, I can say a background process, where is this? A background process and a process is almost the same. So even if you create a process and you can deploy it as a background process in your orchestrator, okay, there is no big difference. So ideally, when we are doing real-time projects, The general practice is we just go and create a process, and we can create it as a background process or a foreground process, and we can go ahead and continue. This part you will understand as we go. You will be able to correlate at, at the 10th class or the 12th class. Okay, this information, okay, this is what is the correlation between these things. Okay, for now, you just remember the information. So this is your background process. So a background process means there is no user interaction at all. So you cannot have a message box. You cannot have any boxes to display for the user and all those things. So that is a piece of coding that we will avoid. Okay, a piece of activities that we will avoid. So it runs in the background. So which means other than the message box or certain display information, all the rest of the activities you can use it. That is a background process. Okay, and then we have something called a transactional process. A transactional process is nothing but a process that is based on the flowchart model. Okay, so a flowchart that is available, right? Sequence flowchart. So that flowchart model. So which means they have a predefined information. So here also the structure remains the same as that of a process. Okay, here they have given you a pre-designed information. So what actually generally a project will be when you're doing data processing projects. Okay, when you have a lot of data to process. So what will happen? You will be doing the first data. You'll take that particular data. You will be doing the processing after that. The processing will be like, say, suppose you have an Excel sheet and you're having numbers. You're having appraisal calculation. So what you will be doing, the first data will be the first employee. For the first employee, you're taking the first employee and then you're doing the processing of the appraisal calculation. You will be saying, okay, this person has to get a 10% calculation. So 10% appraisal will be updated in column D. And then the next data, right? And for the next data also, you're taking the data and you're doing the same processing, correct? So what we can do is the data input, the processing, and you're going to go and see if you're having the next data or not. The next data means the same processing. The fifth data, the sixth data, and for the 10th data, there is no more data. So it will go and end the process. So whenever you want to do a processing for more than one data, that we call it as a transaction processing. Okay. So whenever you have multiple data that you want to process, which means the appraisal calculation is the same. Okay. But the data is different, right? So the processing is the same. The data is more than one data. So those type of information, we call it as a transaction. So what we do, we get the first data, we do the transaction processing. Get the second data, we do the transaction processing. Third data, transaction processing. Fourth data. And when it reaches the fifth data, it will say, okay, no more data. So no sixth data. So it will end the process. Okay. So this is what we do as a transaction processing based on a flowchart model. Can I do the same thing using the simple process template? Yes. So I can, instead of you creating a transaction process, I can create a normal process. Okay. Drag in a flowchart and I can drag in a sequence. I can call it as a data input. I can drag in another box like this and I can call it as like this. So I can achieve the same thing with a process template also. Okay. So which means if you see a process template, a background process, a transactional process, all these things can be achieved with a simple process template itself. Okay. Then we are going to go for orchestration process. This is another template that is available for the processes that you want to deploy to the orchestrator, which means ideally at real time, all the processes, right? All the process has to be deployed on the orchestrator, right? So the same kind of, here only the dependencies has gone, but otherwise it's the same structure. Again, you have the same flowchart that you can drag and drop and you can do your piece of coding. Okay. So which means again, this is going to be very similar to a process. Okay. So you can create a process and you can deploy it on the orchestrator, or you can create an orchestration process and you can deploy it in the orchestrator. Okay. So here also your piece of code will be a creation of a flowchart like this, or you can drag a sequence inside it and you can create it. So this can be ideally chosen whenever you have long running processes, whether it is an attended or an unattended automation, you can use this particular template. The same will be applicable for process also, whether it is an attended or an unattended. Attended or unattended means with human interaction, without human interaction, which means with message box, without message box, right? So those kind of automations you can also create it as a process. So a process, orchestration process, a transaction process, a background process, based on your project requirement, you can choose this or you can simply choose the process and you can go ahead and convert it into any of the three types. Okay, all this follows the same methodology, right? Then we have something called a trigger based automation. This is a different information. You cannot have it having as a process. Okay, now what is a trigger based information? So trigger based information is nothing but a trigger based automation is nothing but an attended automation. And attended automation means a user interactive automation, right? A user support is required. So what does that mean? The trigger based automation is something that is predefined for you. So there is a level of code that is already given for you. Your flowcharts are already given for you. So what is a trigger based automation? So a trigger based automation is nothing but on certain trigger that gets generated, a certain set of activities will be created or a certain set of processes will be initiated. Okay, so there might be an example where I have my Internet Explorer open. When I click on Alt F4, the Internet Explorer closes. How? When you press a trigger of Alt F4, the Internet Explorer window should close. So somebody has written a code to say if you press Alt F4, do this action, right? The same thing will be like you create some action, based on that set of actions will be created. So based on the trigger, there will be a set of actions that will be created. Okay, that is a trigger based attended automation, which means the user will be able to see what is happening in the foreground, or the user will start this particular process, or the user will be notified, or this is based on the user interaction. Okay, right? So we have this as a trigger based attended automation. So what does it do? So we have two options. You have two options of a trigger. Okay, one, you can do it on a window that is open, like an application that is open. Okay, so you can have an application that is open and you can have a trigger generated from it. So when I say an application that is open means, so this is your application that is open. So you can have two kind of triggers in the application open. One is a click trigger based on my mouse. Okay, so if I go click at this particular point, I'm clicking at this particular area. So when I go click on this particular area, I want to do a certain set of actions. Okay, this is number one. Number two is based on a keyboard shortcut. So if I give a keyboard shortcut, when my Google Explorer is opened, and when I do a keyboard shortcut, a certain set of actions will be triggering. Okay, this is the first option. Okay, the second option is irrespective of the window, that is no user interface. Okay, irrespective of the window, when you have a keyboard shortcut triggered. Okay, so you can do a configuration. You can either open a particular application and you can configure a mouse trigger, or you can configure a keyboard trigger. Okay, a shortcut key trigger, or wherever the user is, if they generate a keyboard shortcut, the triggering action will work. So there are two sets. One is a key press trigger, a click trigger, and a key press trigger. Both will be working on screen level, on whichever screen that you have set. If you have a screen of Google page, then that particular page, if you go and click somewhere, then a set of actions will be happening. Or on that particular page only, if you do a shortcut key, that particular action will be triggered. Or the next option is anywhere you press a key. Okay, so then a set of actions will be triggered. So this particular option we will do when we are doing some web page automation or any other automation. Let's stick on to a keyboard trigger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run, or I'm going to say, if I want to press Alt and Enter, I can choose between the keys here. So when I want to press Alt Enter, sorry, when I want to press Alt Enter, I want my program to actually go ahead and let me delete all this. Okay, I want my program to go ahead and display a message box. Okay, it could be instead of displaying a message box, you want to open an application or you want to process a particular mail, anything could be coded here. Okay, just for demo purpose, I'm putting a message box. Right? So I'm giving a message box, automatically that I symbol has gone. So let me execute. So when I execute, I'm going to execute my program from the UiPath Studio as run. Okay, or Control F5. Okay, my project is running. I'm pressing a lot of keys. Nothing is happening. I'm pressing Alt, Enter. So the triggering action is triggered. Okay. So again, I'm trying. Still the program is running at the background. Again, I'm doing a lot of other keys. Nothing has happened. Again, I'm pressing an Alt, Enter. Okay. So this is how. So wherever, whichever screen you are, if you press that particular Alt, Enter, if your processing says you go open mail or you go open a particular application or you go do something else, so that particular actions will be triggered. Okay. So that is your trigger based automation. So still my program is running. Okay. So it is still waiting for this particular activity to be triggered. So this, I'm just stopping it so that my program will be stopped. So this is your trigger based automation. Okay. Then we have, so where you can use the real-time example is there might be a user who might be saying, I do a certain set of activities based on a file that is incoming. So when I do not know when that particular file will come. So what they will be doing is when they will be monitoring that particular file to be coming in, or they will, or if they want a shortcut, like when a particular user pings that particular customer care, they can simply say, okay, the user is giving a request of checkbook. They can give a automatic key press and the checkbook process will initiate. They can just key in the customer ID and the checkbook process will be, a new service request will be created. So instead of the customer care guy going and clicking on something and then clicking on checkbook status and then going in, he can simply create that particular shortcut key and automatic process will be running. Okay. So those kind of process you can call it as a trigger based automation, right? The last one is going to be the robotic enterprise framework. The robotic enterprise framework is a framework that is based on state machine concept. Okay. This framework, we are going to detail it very much in detail. We are going to learn it as a part of our course, right? So we will cover it in detail at that particular time. Everything will be changed. The structure is changed as well. There is a pre-written piece of coding. The design and everything of your workflow is completely changed. Okay. This robotic enterprise framework is a framework that is built by UiPath in order to help the developer. So which means the best practices that the developer needs to have, like logging your errors or like exception handling, or like if Amazon fails, what it should do? It should go and retry, right? So the retry logic. So all those things generally in all the other templates you need to write. As a developer, you need to create that logic. But in this particular template, the logic is already pre-written for you. Okay. So what you need to do is you just need to give your project requirement alone. Other than that, all the best practices are already pre-written for you. Okay. So which means it supports the developer and the developer will not be able to make any kind of mistakes. By default, the retry will be there. So even if he doesn't have a retry mechanism written in his program, the program will retry in case of any errors. So this is a framework that is written for, with all the best practices pre-written, and most of the projects that is there in the current IT scenario are based on this particular framework only.